Good evening and welcome to Beyond the Numbers here live on the Joy News channel. And that today we move into a very interesting topic. 15 years down the lane when Ghana's pipe was open to declare the flow of crude oil into the country when the late former President John Evans Atta Mills declared that it's time for us to see the glory of the benefit of oil to the country. We've heard this news about how Saudi Arabia transformed the economy because of the blessing of natural resources. We felt that of cocoa, we felt that of the agri sector, and subsequently we've seen various tremendous contributions to our GDP. But whether we felt the benefit after 15 years of exploration based on the contract and agreement and where we are as a country is what we're going to be tapping on. My name is Winston Taki, and I'm doing this with
Isaac Ofeje. And as usual, Caleb Ziblim will join us on the Smart Wall. And just like Winston said, it's been 15 years so far. We'll be looking at the energy sector or the petroleum sector in general. But tonight, we will narrow down on the controversies around Tullow Ghana Limited. And why is that important? Because when we discovered that oil in when we started drilling in 2010, one of the first companies that was brought on board in terms of, drilling was Tullow. Now, 15 years down the line, it's been a cocktail of different factors. Good times with Tullow and possibly arbitration times with Tullow. We'll analyze all for you on the Smart Wall here on Beyond the Numbers. I want Caleb to start how we've come so far in the last 15 years, starting from 2010 when, just like Winston said, we started opening our pipes and started getting crude oil. Caleb, what is the story in the last 15 years? How have we fared in terms of our crude oil production?
So you can see from the slide, our crude oil production started in 2010, going up a bit. From 2010 to 2019, that's where we peaked at 71 million barrels for the entire year. And then since then, we've seen a steady decline from 71 million barrels and now doing 48 million barrels as of 2024. And projections are we might go lower this year as well. So even though we started rising from 2010 from 1 million barrels to 71 million barrels, we've now come down to 48 million barrels, which might say the sector is struggling a bit.
Well, so, Winston, a very interesting picture being painted there by Caleb. You can see the movement, and it's almost like, a pyramid or a triangle where we move this way, and then we are seeing a decline. Is it a sign that, in the years to come, what have we been doing so wrong that we peaked at 71 million barrels per year? And now we are talking about almost, less than that, like half of that, just about 48.2 million, barrels a year. What is really happening, and why are we seeing this significant drop in our crude oil production? It's supposed to be one of the backbone of the Ghanaian economy. Cocoa currently is dropping, crude oil is dropping. Looks like our only hope now is gold. But tell me, what is happening? Why are we having this huge, significant drops in the petroleum sector in terms of crude oil production?
You and I could testify that the moment we experienced our budgets change tremendously in the last 15 years was when we announced that we are going into exploration, basically discovery, and literally a standard announcement that the Jubilee field is now good to do business. And since then, our budgeting has changed. We saw consistently being reflected in our GDP, that is GDP plus oil, and this became a key indicator of how the economy has been performing. So backed by oil, we saw growth immediately. It was announced in our next budget after we started exploration. Throughout those period, the international crude oil price was also up, and we benefited tremendously out of sale, and which supported various infrastructure development within the sector, including developments that are needed to ensure we get to a point where we can refine, even though there were challenges in how we could refine this natural resource without necessarily exporting it in its raw state. Over the years, one of the key challenges that have bedeviled the sector is regulatory oversight, lack of regulatory oversight, and disagreement in contractual agreement, whether the key explorers are abiding within the conditions that were predetermined before the exploration, or whether in terms of profitability, the margins was quite reasonable based on the royalty payment, and all these became key issue. Initially, because of that, it helped most of the investors to stay at bay, looking whether there are thriving challenges within the sector. So they reduced their investment. Subsequently, you can realize it's from 2014 to 2016, the investment was a bit minimal, and therefore we were producing quite less. But between 2017 to 2020, we saw higher investment within those periods. That was meaning that we got to receive a lot of barrels per day. That is about 71 million barrels per day from the initial 1.1 million where we began in 2010. But we realized it kept falling down because of the arbitration, which became a key challenge. We saw Tullow initially putting a hold on some of the wells, and that became a key issue of contention.
Even last year, we understand Tullow decided not to go on a certain tangent with some of its wells and some of its fields. Possibly, just like I said, it's simply because of some of this arbitration. We'll come to the arena of arbitration, but I actually want Caleb to sum up for us.
Yes.
Look at all of these years, I mean, close to 14 years down the line. How much are we talking about in terms of the total oil that we've been able to produce since our first drilling in 2011?
And yeah, so we produced some 652 million barrels. And I round it off a bit, so it's a little higher than 652, but we've gotten more than 600 million barrels from crude oil production in the country. And the government doesn't take the entire revenue gotten from the 600 million barrels. So the percentage that the government takes, we've rigged in $11 billion for the past 14 years.
Wow. So you're talking about how much has come to government as revenue, right? That's about
$11.2 billion.
Now, Winston, if we should do the math, right? 600 million barrels, if we should even say we are using about $50 per barrel, that would simply mean that how much we've actually gotten from our oil since 2011 is possibly woefully inadequate. Do you all agree with me that if you look at the quantum of money we may have received in terms of the total export, in terms of the production we've done, close to 652 million barrels, just about 11.2 billion coming into the Ghanaian economy. If you strike the average, that's about, let's say, close about 1 billion or 1 billion every year. But we
1.3 last year.
1.3 last year. But if you look at the total amount of oil that we export, it's in excess of $3 billion every year, which means that more than half of that is possibly taken away almost every year. Now, I mean, you're bringing in an expert on board, and I want you to rope him in and ask him, I mean, what is going on? This is because of our contractual agreement. That's why we've received so less, over the past 15 years, or what is really happening? And in terms of the arbitration, why have we gotten to this point in this time, Winston?
We're hoping we will have Mr. Victor Akufo-Addo, who is a legal practitioner and a managing director with Excel Consultancy, to give us more insight on the development. Good afternoon. If you're here, you can join us now on Beyond the Numbers. Good evening, sir. Great. Now, we want to get from you, given the Supreme Court's ruling in 2017 between Banfo versus Attorney General, do you believe the current MOU between the government and Tullow Oil constitutes a constitutional breach if not brought before Parliament?
Thank you for your question, and good evening once again to your listeners. I don't think it's just a straightforward response would be adequate. Now, the Supreme Court in 2017 in Banfo and Attorney General, and also in the Attorney General and Federal Atlantic case, as well as the Attorney General and Vulcan Energy Ghana Limited and others cases, we have the critical principle of constitutional interpretation that substance must always prevail over form. Now, if a memorandum of understanding has the practical effect of extending petroleum rights or modifying fiscal obligations, in my view, it would trigger not Article 185, which deals with international business transactions, which require and so deal with 61, which provides, and if I may quote, any transaction, contract, or undertaking involving a grant of right, especially by health, including the government of Ghana, any other body of law for the exploitation of
Okay. Mr. Victor, we get your point.
natural resource of Ghana shall be subject to ratification by Parliament. And so the argument that if the memorandum of understanding is not seen only as an intent, but would serve to alienate the mineral rights, then it would require parliamentary approval.
Now, stay with us. I want us to do some bit of analysis. We'll come back to you with some more questions. And Caleb, we've been actually looking at Tullow. And the reason why Tullow is so important whenever you're talking about arbitrations, we've had a number of arbitration. But the reason why Tullow is always important is the quantum of money that is involved. I understand there are 3 cases so far. Already we have lost one. And if I say we, I mean government or the country has lost one against Tullow, which involves some $320 million. There are 2 more. I want you to walk us through it. And the current case, Winston and I will go into the details and analyze. Then we'll bring in Mr. Ankuchede.
Yeah, so in 2018, the government of Ghana decided to review some taxes paid by Tullow for a period of time. And they discovered that, subsequent reviews discovered that $300 million was underpaid by Tullow. So Tullow had to cough up an extra $320 million in unpaid taxes and overdue taxes. So that was a problem in 2018. And it dragged on for about from 2018 to 2024. And in December last year, the International Arbitration Court in the UK settled on the case that Tullow was not liable to pay this $320 million. So it means that all the legal fees we paid, the international lawyers, the trips to the UK and back and everything.
All became a big loss.
And the courts actually made Ghana pay some of the legal fees incurred by Tullow. So that whole agenda was really, very, very sad for the country indeed. However, there are 2 more cases to go. One involving $190 million and the other $196 million. So the total is about $398 million. That is now hanging a balance between Ghana and Tullow.
In fact, Winston, this is a very interesting development coming through, and we've been trying to get the background story to this because here at Beyond the Numbers, what we do is to tell you the stories behind the numbers. Now, this close to, let's say, $400 million in arbitration currently, we understand that one has to do with a certain interest payment issues and the other has to do with insurance, right? Where if you look at what the process are actually going to begin, maybe somewhere by Monday or next week, we understand the Attorney General's department is already in London. The arbitration will continue, will start very soon. But what we understand is that if you look at the amount involved and the whole controversy around this close to $191 million is that when we engaged Tullow somewhere 2009 to start exploration and after development and maybe drilling, we understand that Tullow Ghana had told government that it had money to possibly go ahead with the drilling without having to take a loan. But I think down the line, years down the line, governments realized that there were some, other subsidiary arrangements with other third parties and all of that. And as a result of that, actually affected Ghana's,
revenue outcome.
Exactly, the revenue outcome. Now, I want us to ask Mr. Ankuchede. I mean, are you familiar with this case, and do you think that Ghana has a very good case in this arbitration, which is expected to begin somewhere next week?
Unfortunately, I am not familiar with the facts of this case. The information you have relayed is the first time I'm hearing that much detail. I am aware that we have lost one arbitration and that others are ongoing. However, unfortunately, I do not think I'm in a position to comment because I do not have the facts.
But I mean, the case that I mean, away from the arbitration, another case is that there are other parties who are against the, the extension of Tullow's, contract. What really is the problem? If everything is all right with the previous contract we signed with Tullow, why should we become a challenge to extend it to, let's say, 2040?
Right. So my engagement with civil society groups and then those or proponents who are against this stems from one major thing. Now, Ghana's earlier petroleum agreements were shaped by its statutes at the time and the fact that we're an unproven frontier market with high geological risk, weak institutions, and no commercial discovery. To attract investment, government then offered very favorable terms to foreign oil companies. I mean, these include low government take compared to global averages. There were capped royalty rates as low as 5%, general cost recovery of up to 80% of production, minimum state typically states to care about. There was an absence of windfall tax, and the stabilization cost most of these agreements was quite broad. Indeed, my understanding of the matter that brought, I understand this on provisions of the stabilization cost, which says that you cannot change the terms of the agreement to their advantage. So these were the circumstances under which we negotiated those agreements. Now, as the country's petroleum sector has with stronger, improved data, and a functional regulatory regime, my view is that these legacy contracts have increasingly been out of step with our development goals. And this, I believe, underscores the call for the renegotiation. So the issue, as I understand it, is this contract expires in 2036. Why, in just 11 years, why don't we let it expire? Why are we rushing to extend for 4 years when the contract has not expired? I believe that those are the underlying questions of civil society and many of the critics that I have come across.
All right, Council, so in your opinion, the 11 billion that the country has accrued since the beginning of oil production in 2010, 2011, thereabouts, is because of the kind of structure the petroleum agreement has outlined for these companies? And is it time that we go away with this structure and introduce new mechanisms to increase the royalties and some taxes paid by the mining companies?
Yes, that is my view. As I have indicated, we have matured as a country operating within the petroleum sector. We now have improved data. During those times, we didn't even have access to data, seismic shoots, and things of that nature. Now we do. In other words, we do have a much higher bargaining power. And so I think that we can better demand much more from the natural resources that we own as a country.
Well, interesting. I mean, if we had given, petroleum investors this kind of favorable terms, at this point in time, would it also be risky to give them contracts that have, let's say, high premiums, looking at the fact that there is a lot of competition going on, and even looking at the cost of production, for instance, the projection was that we should be able to produce somewhere around $30 per barrel. It looks like we are doing above that threshold. And look at countries like Saudi Arabia and the Middle East, where they are able to produce way below, let's say, $10 or even $20. Wouldn't we be subjecting ourselves to tough competition? And do you not think that that's part of the reason why the president says that, look, all companies must come on board. If you really want to drill in Ghana, come, let's have a negotiation, because the oil is sitting there, but definitely we are not drilling and we are not getting the best out of it.
This is a difficult one. I cannot second guess the president. I cannot second guess the executive as to what rationale they have. I do believe that they do have good intentions, and that their intention is indeed to derive the maximum benefit of our natural resources for the country. I do take the point that in a competitive environment. The oil extraction business is a very, very expensive business. I mean, I have seen figures, for instance, where you need up to about $1 million a day in prospecting or exploration of oil. Now, if as a country you cannot match that sort of financial inflow in the business, your bargaining power tends to be weakened. However, the argument we are making is not really to say that let's do a 50-50 split. We are not a Christian society. I believe Ghana recognizes the fact that it is dead in some extent. However, the figures, for instance, that my counted was that 2010-20, we earned just under some 5 billion from the Jubilee field operation, while the international oil companies received as much as 8.6 billion. Now, if you recall, we went to the IMF for $3 billion to stabilize our economy under such stringent conditions. If a bit of the 18.6 billion is given to us, I believe it would have saved us some of those things and would shore up our economy. So I believe what the argument is not to say that let's have a 50-50 split or let's be on the upper hand. I believe what civil society and the others that I have come across are saying is that give us a bit of what belongs to us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Victor Akufo-Addo, for giving us this insight on the development. We'll surely be following up on this particular narrative, and certainly we're hoping from next week the case will be handled. One very important aspect we want our viewers to know before we leave is the conditions for the extension, which is an increase in gas supply. That is the agreement. And let's not forget, the agreement, according to go to the official website of Tullow Ghana, is between the government of Ghana, Tullow, Cosmos Energy, PetroSA, Petro SA, Ghana National Petroleum Commission, Exproco license, which has extended the license. So these are the conditions: reduced gas price and basically investment in GNPC and Petroleum Commission. This has to do with involvement in high technology in the sector. Existing petroleum agreement continue unchanged. That is from 2004 till now. All those agreements will still remain standard, and according to them, is to ensure there's stability in contractual agreements. So these are what we'll be expecting.
If I have a question for Caleb, and Caleb, I mean, arbitrations upon arbitrations with Tullow, it definitely means that possibly there is something wrong either from Ghana's side or Tullow's side, because these are two entities that went to the negotiation table as far back as 2009. You've worked together for almost 15 years. Why do you keep on having tax arbitration? Now, looking at all of these arbitration upon arbitration, do you really see a future in sight, I mean, with Tullow? Do you think that there's going to be a point in time where Tullow will decide, possibly, I am tired, or government of Ghana will decide that, well, maybe we feel cheated, and so we cannot continue this contract again with you?
Well, I don't think we'll be seeing that anytime soon, because Tullow still makes a lot of money from the oil they are producing in the country, which is a major investment that they fully put into the sector. So just pulling out because of a few $1 million, I don't think so, because they make billions from these wells. So
absolutely,
pulling out because of a few $1 million as it stands now, I don't think so. And according to Tullow, they are still exploring ways between GRA and the government outside the arbitration channels. So and it's a new administration, if you look at through that lens. So a new administration has come, they might try to settle things outside the arbitration court, because GRE and then the Attorney General's office have new management. So they might look on, they might find a consensus between Tullow and then the government of Ghana somewhere outside the arbitration channels. Well,
interesting, details. If Tullow really trusts government, why do we have an arbitration around tax in the international space? Why not sit within the local space to talk about it? A lot of, dark shadows around the deal and also controversies. We possibly cannot, exhaust all of this in 30 minutes. We definitely will be bringing you more of the agreement between government of Ghana and Tullow and the kind of arbitration that have been going on for some time now. This has been Beyond the Numbers. My name is Isaac Ofeje, and I did this with the two gentlemen, Winston Taki and Caleb Ziblim. See you next week, 2 p.m. on Wednesday. and then 5:30 p.m. on Friday. Thank you so much for being our guest.